Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Vanishing Heiress. Chapter 1, Smoke over Chicago. The year was 1875, and Chicago still wore the scars of the Great Fire. Whole blocks had risen from ashes into brick and stone, yet the air always smelled faintly of soot, as if the city itself remembered the inferno. At the western rail yard, the ground trembled beneath iron wheels. Locomotives belched smoke thick enough to blot out the sun, whistles shrieked like wounded animals, and workers in soot-stained coats hurried about with clipboards, ledgers, and grim expressions. To most, the scene was chaos. To Allan Pinkerton, it was music he had long since learned to read. Pinkerton stood at the edge of the platform, pipe clenched between his teeth, his gaze sharp as ever beneath the brim of his wide felt hat. He was 65 now, though few who crossed him dared call him old. His back remained straight, his eyes unclouded, and his instincts as keen as the day he had stopped the Baltimore plot to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. Age had made him slower in fistfights, perhaps, but he relied less on his fists these days. His mind was still the weapon that frightened criminals most. He had come to the yard that morning not on a case but for a meeting. His detective agency, by now famous across America, thrived on contracts with railroads, banks, and business magnates. Today, however, the visitor was not a faceless corporation. It was Charles Winslow, the steel baron whose furnaces kept half of Chicago employed and the other half resentful. Winslow had requested privacy, and Pinkerton had chosen the rail yard as neutral ground. He distrusted opulent drawing rooms where gilded walls concealed too many listening ears. A carriage pulled up to the platform. Out stepped Winslow himself, a stout man in a tailored overcoat with a diamond stickpin flashing at his cravat. His face was ruddy from drink, his eyes sharp with suspicion. Two bodyguards followed, but Winslow waved them back when he saw Pinkerton. "Mr. Pinkerton," he said, removing his hat with a flourish. "I trust you know who I am." Pinkerton's lips twitched around his pipe. "If I didn't, I've been in the wrong business all these years. Charles Winslow, owner of half the mills that choke this city with smoke." Winslow's expression soured at the barb, but he pressed on. "I'll be plain. My daughter Clara has disappeared." The words hung in the smoke-filled air, heavy as iron. Pinkerton studied him a long moment. "Disappeared? Explain." Winslow's voice dropped. "She was to travel east to New York 3 days ago. Her carriage was found abandoned on a rural road outside Joliet. The horse unharmed, reins cut clean through. Inside, her satchel overturned. But no sign of Clara." Pinkerton drew the pipe from his mouth. "And what of ransom? A note? A messenger?" "None," Winslow said. His hand tightened on the head of his cane. "That is what troubles me. Bandits leave demands. Rivals send threats. This silence chills me more than either." The detective let smoke curl from his lips, considering. "Who knew of her journey?" "Family, of course. My secretary. A few household servants. The coachman, naturally." Winslow's eyes narrowed. "But all are loyal. I have rewarded loyalty well." Pinkerton thought but did not speak. Money bought obedience, not always loyalty. Aloud he asked, "Your daughter, was she content with this journey?" A flicker crossed Winslow's face, quickly masked. She is 20, stubborn, but she knew her duty. I arranged her engagement to a fine young banker in New York. She would not resist. Pinkerton's gaze sharpened. Would not, or did not wish to? Winslow bristled. You think she fled of her own will? Absurd. Clara is devoted to her family. The detective tamped the ashes of his pipe. I think nothing yet. But I have learned daughters vanish for many reasons, and not all involve ruffians on the highway. A gust of wind swept smoke through the yard. Winslow's temper frayed. I did not come here to be lectured on the whims of women. I came because if anyone can find Clara, it is you. My fortune is at your disposal. Spare no expense. Pinkerton fixed him with a hard stare. I'll take the case, but not for your fortune. My men and I will seek the truth. You may not like what we find. Winslow hesitated, then inclined his head. Very well. Just bring her back. That evening, Pinkerton returned to his office on Washington Street. The headquarters of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency was a sober building of stone, its windows lit by gas lamps and its halls echoing with footsteps of operatives. Inside, maps lined the walls, and filing cabinets held dossiers on criminals, union organizers, and political agitators alike. Above the entrance hung the motto that made Pinkerton famous, "We never sleep." He gathered his senior operatives, George Bangs, his chief of staff, and two trusted detectives, Kate Warren and Timothy Webster. Warren, America's first female detective, had proven herself invaluable in cases requiring subtlety and disguise. Webster, calm and meticulous, could follow a trail invisible to most. Pinkerton briefed them. Clara Winslow vanished 3 days past. Carriage found abandoned near Joliet. No ransom note. Her father fears rivals. I suspect deeper matters. Warren asked, shall we begin at the carriage? Indeed, Pinkerton said. I'll inspect the scene myself. Kate, speak with the servants in the Winslow household. Find what the Baron overlooks. Webster, trace Clara's last movements in Chicago. Who she saw, what errands she made. Bangs, handle correspondence and telegrams, we may need speed. They nodded, accustomed to his clipped orders. Pinkerton leaned forward, voice low. Remember, do not trust appearances. Winslow swears loyalty surrounds him. But loyalty bought by gold can turn with the wind. As his operatives dispersed, Pinkerton lingered by the window. Outside, the city glowed with furnace fire and gaslight. He thought of Clara Winslow, a young woman pressed into marriage, trapped between her father's empire and her own will. Whether she had been stolen, silenced, or had fled, he did not yet know. But he knew one truth, behind every disappearance lay secrets. And secrets never stayed buried for long. At dawn, Pinkerton boarded a train south toward Joliet, pipe in hand, notebook ready. The case had only begun, and already smoke swirled thicker than the locomotives belching outside. Somewhere in that smoke lay Clara's trail. And Allan Pinkerton, as ever, would not rest until he followed it into the fire. Chapter 2, The Empty Carriage. The morning sun was weak as Allan Pinkerton stepped off the train near Joliet. Frost clung stubbornly to the grass, and the field stretched in a bleak expanse under a sky still bruised from night. A local constable waited for him, a young man whose uniform looked new enough to creak. His name was Harris, and he doffed his hat nervously when Pinkerton approached. Mr. Pinkerton, sir. The carriage is still where we found it. I kept gawkers away as best I could, but you know how folk are. Half the town's made guesses, bandits, gypsies, even ghosts, if you'll believe it. I believe in carelessness and lies more than ghosts, Pinkerton said. His voice was flat, but his eyes missed nothing as Harris led him down a rutted lane toward a patch of woodland. The road was churned by many hooves and wagon wheels, the main route to the railway often bustled with traffic. But soon Harris pointed to a side path where fewer prints marred the soil. Just down there. The carriage lay at a tilt in the ditch, as Winslow had described. Its lacquered paint caught the weak light, though one wheel was splintered from the sudden halt. The horse was gone, though the cut reins dangled like severed veins. Pinkerton crouched, examining the ground. The earth told stories for those who listened. "See here," he murmured, drawing Harris closer. The horse was led away, not bolted. The hooves fall neat, calm. No sign of panic. He tapped the reins. Cut with a blade. Sharp, deliberate. Harris swallowed. So, abduction? Perhaps, Pinkerton said. Or a performance meant to suggest abduction. He opened the carriage door. Inside, the cushions were askew, a velvet satchel overturned on the floor. He picked it up, careful not to smudge the dirt that streaked its side. Within he found scattered belongings, a comb, a folded opera program for a performance scheduled in New York, and a small bottle of perfume that had spilled, staining the fabric. On the seat lay a torn scrap of lace, caught in a splinter. Pinkerton pocketed the lace, his expression unreadable. "Does anyone in town recall seeing her?" Harris nodded. "A farmer said he passed the coach around dusk. Claimed a man in a stovepipe hat was standing by the road, smoking. Said it struck him odd, but he thought no more of it till news spread." Pinkerton grunted softly. Stovepipe hat. A detail men rarely forget, yet often convenient to invent. "Still, we follow it." He climbed out, eyes sweeping the ground beyond the ditch. Wagon tracks curved away into the trees, deeper than the ruts of the main road. They ended abruptly 100 yards in, as though the wagon had stopped, turned, and vanished back toward town. But there, in the mud, Pinkerton's keen gaze caught something else, the faint outline of a boot print, smaller than a man's, too fine for a farmhand. A woman's, perhaps. He knelt, tracing it with one blunt finger. "Harris, have you measured these?" The constable flushed. "No, sir. I didn't think." "Thinking is your business," Pinkerton snapped, though his voice lacked malice. He took out his notebook, sketching quickly. Print faces east. Deeper at the toe, as if hurrying. Alone. He rose, pipe smoke curling in the air. Clara Winslow may have left the carriage on her own feet. Harris gaped. "You mean she wasn't taken?" "I mean nothing yet. But do not confuse absence of struggle with absence of will. If she was dragged, we would see scuffs, more prints, signs of haste. This step is clean." She walked. They returned to the road, where a handful of villagers had gathered at a distance. Curiosity gleamed in their eyes, but they shrank when Pinkerton's gaze cut toward them. One elderly woman, however, stood her ground. She leaned on a walking stick, her shawl wrapped tight. Pinkerton approached her directly. "You were here the night this carriage stopped?" She gave a sharp nod. "I heard wheels, then nothing. Looked from my porch and saw a lantern flicker in the trees. Thought it strange, but I'm an old woman. Strange things don't stir me." "Did you see the lady?" Pinkerton asked. Her lips pressed thin. "I saw a figure in pale dress step from the carriage. Walked steady. Not dragged. Went toward the grove, where that man in the tall hat waited. They spoke a moment, then moved off together." Harris gasped, but Pinkerton only inclined his head. "Thank you. You've told me more than all the others." He slipped her a coin, though she seemed insulted at the gesture. As they walked back toward town, Harris whispered, "So she met him willingly?" "Or unwillingly with a mask of calm," Pinkerton said. "A lady taught to hold her composure even in fear might walk as though nothing were amiss. The question is, did she know him?" By dusk, Pinkerton lodged at a modest inn in Joliet. He spread the evidence across his table, the satchel, the lace scrap, his sketches of tracks. The story forming was crooked, incomplete. Clara had departed the carriage, but whether by choice or coercion, he could not yet say. The mysterious man in the stovepipe hat loomed over every detail, a shadow with neither name nor origin. He lit his pipe, smoke curling against the low ceiling. His mind moved as it always did, stripping away illusions, seeking motive. Bandits left trails, ransom notes, bodies. Rivals sent messages, threats, ultimatums. But this, an heiress vanishing without trace, no note, no cry, no demand, this was stranger. Too clean. Pinkerton thought of Winslow's bluster, his insistence that Clara was loyal. Fathers saw loyalty where daughters felt only chains. Clara's letters, if they existed, would reveal more than her father's speeches ever could. Until then, Pinkerton trusted only the ground and the people who walked it. He drafted instructions for his operatives by lamplight. Kate Warne was to press the servants harder, their tongues might loosen for another woman. Webster would shadow taverns and boarding houses in Chicago for whispers of a tall-hatted stranger. Bangs would coordinate telegraphs to railway agents from here to New York. If Clara moved east, someone would have seen her. When he sealed the notes, he felt the old thrill, an unsolved puzzle, threads tangled and waiting. Yet he also felt unease. Too many puzzles ended with graves. The following morning, Pinkerton returned to the carriage once more before leaving Joliet. Mist clung to the fields, muffling sound. He placed a hand on the splintered wheel, as though feeling the memory of that night. Clara Winslow had sat here, her satchel by her side, a future not of her choosing before her. Then a pause, a decision, or a deception, and the path into shadow. The detective straightened, eyes narrowing. Somewhere in those shadows, someone believed themselves clever enough to mislead Allan Pinkerton. He almost pitied them. Almost. Chapter 3, The Man with the Stovepipe Hat. The train back to Chicago rattled with the noise of wheels on iron, yet Allan Pinkerton's mind was far noisier. He had spent the return journey reviewing every detail of the abandoned carriage. The footprints, the calm departure, the witness who swore Clara had walked away with a stranger, these pieces formed an outline, but not the picture itself. Somewhere in that outline, the tall man in the stovepipe hat loomed like a dark brushstroke across a half-finished canvas. When Pinkerton reached his Washington Street office, he found Kate Warne already waiting in the outer hall. Her sharp eyes carried the fatigue of a long day's questioning, but also the gleam of discovery. She ushered him quickly into the inner chamber where gaslight flickered across shelves of files and the ever-watchful motto, "We never sleep." "I pressed the Winslow servants," she said without preamble. At first they parroted loyalty. But one maid, young, timid, finally admitted something. She swears Clara met a gentleman several times in secret over the last month. He came to the house after dusk, always cloaked, but his hat, tall and straight, impossible to miss. Pinkerton lit his pipe. "So our shadow walks into the light. Did she give a name?" Warne shook her head. "None. The maid only overheard Clara call him Edward once. But she saw them exchange letters. She believes Clara hid them in her writing desk." Pinkerton's brows knitted. "If the father has found them, he's destroyed them. But if not, Webster can retrieve them." As if summoned, Timothy Webster stepped through the door, his boots clicking against the floorboards. He carried a thin folder. "I've traced whispers of this man to the taverns near the stockyards. Several barkeeps recall a tall fellow, stovepipe hat, polished speech. Paid in silver, asked after Winslow's affairs. Some thought him a newspaperman, others a fortune hunter. None knew his true name. But they all noted he never drank more than a single glass, and he vanished when pressed for details." Pinkerton accepted the folder, scanning Webster's notes. A careful man. Not one to draw suspicion by excess. And if he is Edward, Clara's confidant, then her vanishing is no accident. It is a rendezvous. Webster hesitated. Unless he is a lure. A spider drawing her into a web. Both possibilities live, Pinkerton admitted. But the truth lies in his identity. If we know Edward, we know the motive. That evening, Pinkerton and Warren rode by carriage to the Winslow mansion itself. The house rose like a fortress of wealth, windows glowing against the night. Winslow received them in his study, a cavern lined with leather books and dominated by a portrait of Clara herself, painted in oils, her face serene, her eyes almost defiant. Pinkerton studied the portrait before speaking. "Tell me, Mr. Winslow, who is Edward?" Winslow started as though stung. "Edward? I know no such man." "Then perhaps your daughter did," Pinkerton said smoothly. "Servants speak of clandestine meetings. She received letters. A man in a stovepipe hat. Does this stir memory?" Winslow's face darkened, his knuckles widening on the armrest of his chair. "Nonsense. Gossip. My daughter would not betray her family's trust." Pinkerton leaned forward. "Your daughter may have trusted him more than you. Did she confide her doubts about the engagement you arranged?" The Steel Baron rose suddenly, pacing like a caged bear. "You dare," he caught himself, lowering his voice. "You are paid to find Clara, not to question my household. If this Edward exists, then he is a villain. Expose him." Pinkerton's gaze did not waver. "That is precisely what I intend." Later that night, while Winslow retired in anger, Kate Warren slipped like a shadow through the mansion. She had earned her place in Pinkerton's agency by proving herself master of disguise and subtlety, and tonight she wore the mask of a chambermaid easily ignored. In Clara's room, delicate furnishing spoke of a woman trapped between luxury and longing. The writing desk yielded what Pinkerton had hoped, a false bottom, cleverly fitted. Warren pried it open and withdrew 3 folded letters. By morning, Pinkerton read them in his office. The handwriting was Clara's, strong, elegant, tinged with urgency. "Edward, my father would see me caged in a marriage I cannot endure. I long for escape, but I fear the consequences. You speak of freedom, can it be real, or only words?" Another, later. "I will meet you on the road near Joliet, as you say. If courage does not fail me, I shall step from the carriage and walk toward a new life. If you betray me, Edward, know that I shall curse your name even as I vanish." And finally, the last, undated. "Tomorrow is decided. The carriage will take me past the grove at dusk. There I shall come to you. Afterward, no one must find me until it is too late. Promise me you are not leading me to ruin." Pinkerton tapped the letters with his pipe stem. So Clara planned her own disappearance. Not a victim, at least not at the start. Warren frowned. But the question remains, did Edward mean her well, or ill? Webster entered, his hat in hand. "I may have an answer. I traced the stovepipe man beyond the stockyards. He rented a room above a warehouse near the river, using the name Edward Blackwell. But the landlord says he vanished the same night Clara did. Left behind only a ledger and an odd map." Pinkerton seized the map when Webster laid it down. It was hand-drawn, marking routes along the Illinois River. Several locations were circled: warehouses, ferry crossings, remote clearings. Notations in fine script read like a code: "See safe, see awaits, transfer." "Not the work of a lovesick suitor," Pinkerton muttered. "This is logistics. Movements. Planning." Warren's voice sharpened. "Then Clara may be no bride running to freedom. She may be cargo." The room fell silent at her words. Pinkerton folded the map carefully. "If Blackwell, or whatever his true name, has turned her into a pawn, then time runs short. We must discover who he serves. That afternoon, Pinkerton walked the riverfront himself. Barges groaned under loads of timber and coal, laborers shouting, gulls circling. He moved unnoticed, his plain coat blending with the throng. At one of the warehouses marked on the map, he paused. Its doors hung heavy, and a guard loitered outside, coat collar high despite the warmth. The guard's eyes darted nervously when Pinkerton approached, but he quickly turned away. Pinkerton noted every detail, the crates labeled not with merchants' names but cryptic initials, the unusual number of horses tethered nearby, the faint scent of kerosene drifting from within. Smuggling, perhaps. Arms or contraband. And if Clara Winslow was hidden here, she was entangled in a scheme far larger than a lover's quarrel. As night fell, Pinkerton returned to his office, the city's smoke rolling thick above the streets. He gathered his operatives once more, laying out the map, the letters, the sightings. Our quarry is Edward Blackwell, or the man who calls himself so. He wears the stovepipe hat to be remembered, but everything else he cloaks in shadows. He planned Clara's escape, but whether to free her or ensnare her remains uncertain. What we know is this: he vanishes into the river trade. Tomorrow, we follow him into those waters. He paused, pipe glowing, eyes like flint. And may God help him if he has betrayed her. Chapter 4, Shadows in the Ironworks. The following day dawned under a gray sky, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and hot iron from the western districts of Chicago. The city's pulse was measured in hammer blows and the hiss of steam, and no place throbbed louder than Winslow Ironworks. Pinkerton knew the site well. He had once sent operatives there to break up a ring of thieves who smuggled copper bars under false manifests. But this time, he did not arrive as a hunter of petty crime. He came as a man seeking shadows in the empire of Charles Winslow himself. The ironworks sprawled like a kingdom of soot. Tall chimneys bled smoke into the air, furnaces roared, and hundreds of laborers moved like ants beneath the clang of steel. Sparks burst in showers as molten metal poured into molds, the light staining the walls crimson. The smell was suffocating: sweat, coal, and molten ore. Yet amid the noise, whispers traveled as fast as steel rails. Workers always knew more than they admitted. Pinkerton walked through the yard with a foreman at his side, though the man's unease was plain. "Mr. Winslow didn't say you'd be visiting," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder as if fearful of being seen. "Mr. Winslow needn't know every step I take," Pinkerton replied. His gaze swept across the laborers, faces dark with soot, eyes hollow from endless hours. "Tell me, do they speak often of Clara Winslow here?" The foreman hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Some do. She visited once, brought food to the men during a strike. Stood in the yard, white gloves ruined by soot. Spoke kindly to them, called for shorter shifts, safer conditions. They loved her for it. But Mr. Winslow, he forbade her to return." Pinkerton's expression remained impassive, but his thoughts quickened. Clara Winslow had not been the silent heiress her father painted her as. She had moved among the workers, heard their grievances. Sympathy of that kind could birth enemies in her father's world. And after she vanished? The foreman wiped his brow. "Rumors. Some say she ran off with one of the men. Others say Mr. Winslow had her hidden away. I keep my ears shut, sir. Safer that way." Pinkerton left the foreman and wandered deeper into the yard. His boots crunched over cinders as he entered the main foundry. Inside, the heat was punishing, the roar deafening. He watched men in leather aprons swing great ladles of molten iron, their movements rehearsed, precise. Amid the blaze, he spotted something out of place, a young laborer slipping a folded paper into another's hand. When the exchange ended, the second man slipped the note into his boot. Subtle, but not subtle enough. Pinkerton approached, his presence like a sudden storm. "You," he said to the man with the boot. "What's that you carry?" The worker stiffened. His eyes darted to the furnace doors, then to the yard beyond. Flight flickered in his muscles, but Pinkerton's stare rooted him in place. Slowly, the man pulled the note free and handed it over. Pinkerton unfolded the slip of paper. Inside were names and amounts. Columns of figures, some with initials, some crossed out. But what caught his eye was the scrawled phrase at the bottom, "To receive at River, Tuesday." "Who gave you this?" Pinkerton demanded. The worker shook his head violently. "I don't know his name. Tall, thin, hat like a chimney. Comes after dark, pays us to deliver letters. Said not to read them. I swear it." The stovepipe hat again. Edward Blackwell's shadow stretched even into the ironworks. Pinkerton pocketed the paper. "You'll speak of this to no one," he warned. "If you do, you'll find the iron hotter than these furnaces." That evening, Pinkerton returned with Webster, slipping into the ironworks after the last shift ended. The furnaces still glowed, tended by a skeleton crew, but the rest of the yard was quiet, eerie in its stillness. They moved like phantoms, hugging the shadows. At the back of the foundry, where discarded molds piled high, Pinkerton's lantern revealed a small locked chest half buried in ash. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside lay a ledger, its pages neat with ink. Entries listed shipments of steel and iron, but beneath the legitimate accounts were coded references. E. Consultation fee. E. Movement arranged. C. Secure until notice. The same initials repeated, a hidden record beneath the official business. Webster frowned. C. Must mean Clara. They kept her name out of sight, reduced to a letter. Pinkerton's jaw tightened. Not hidden enough. This ledger ties Edward Blackwell to the ironworks. Winslow may claim ignorance, but his empire shelters the man who took his daughter. They heard a sound then, a faint scrape of boots on stone. Pinkerton doused the lantern. From the shadows emerged two men, burly, armed with pistols tucked into belts. Their eyes swept the yard. One muttered, "Blackwell said to guard the chest. Don't know why the old man cares so much." Pinkerton and Webster exchanged a glance. Blackwell's orders reached everywhere. Even here, among the fires of Winslow's wealth, his hand directed the flow. If these guards discovered them, the night would end in gunfire. Silently, Pinkerton gestured, and they melted deeper into darkness. The guards passed, none the wiser. When they finally slipped out into the cold night air, Pinkerton's mind was a furnace of its own. Clara's sympathies with the workers, her connection to Edward, the coded ledgers, all pointed to a conspiracy larger than a simple elopement. The heiress had become a symbol, and symbols were dangerous to men who traded in iron and blood. The next morning, Pinkerton confronted Winslow again, this time with the ledger in hand. He laid it on the desk in the steel baron's study, beside the portrait of Clara. "Explain these entries." Winslow paled as he scanned the pages. His bluster failed him for the first time. I did not know." "Then your men keep secrets from you," Pinkerton said coldly. "Edward Blackwell has made your ironworks his nest. He moves your daughter like a piece on his board. And your own ledgers betray the truth." Winslow slammed the book shut, his hands trembling. "If what you say is true, then he mocks me in my own house. Find him, Pinkerton. Find Clara. Whatever the cost." Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "Careful what you ask, Winslow. Sometimes truth costs more than gold." He left the mansion with the ledger under his arm. The trail now ran hot, burning through factories and ledgers, through whispers and shadows. Edward Blackwell was no mere suitor. He was an architect of schemes, and Clara Winslow stood at the center of them. And Pinkerton, grim as ever, vowed he would tear every shadow away until Blackwell's true face stood in the light. Chapter 5, The Secret Correspondence. The city was restless that winter evening. A cold drizzle slicked the cobblestones, turning gas lamps into blurred halos and throwing shadows into longer shapes than nature intended. Allan Pinkerton walked with his collar high, the stolen ledger tucked safely beneath his coat. Its coded entries burned in his thoughts, cryptic references tying Clara Winslow to Edward Blackwell's movements. Yet even a ledger was only a skeleton. He needed the flesh of motive, and flesh came only with words. By the time he reached his office, Kate Warren was waiting in the lamplight with a package wrapped in oilcloth. She wasted no time on pleasantries. "From the governess," she said. "Clara's private things. She found these hidden behind a false panel in the girl's wardrobe. She hesitated to surrender them, but I reminded her that Clara's safety depends on truth." Pinkerton took the package to his desk and peeled back the cloth. Inside lay a bundle of letters bound with ribbon, their edges softened by frequent handling. The sight of a young woman's secrets, laid bare, gave even the hard-bitten detective pause. He untied the ribbon and unfolded the first sheet. The handwriting was Clara's, measured, graceful, yet urgent in tone. "Edward, you speak of a life beyond my father's iron walls. You speak of liberty, of choosing one's own fate. I long for such freedom, but I fear the cost. Do not toy with me, for I am caged enough already." Pinkerton read silently, the smoke from his pipe curling above the words. Another letter followed, more desperate. "My father grows crueler with every demand. He binds me to a man I do not love, for business alone. Edward, if your promises are true, meet me where the carriage slows near Joliet. I will know you by your hat, as ever. If I falter, remind me that courage is nothing without action." And then the last, more troubling still. "I feel eyes upon me in the house. Servants whisper. Perhaps my father suspects. If I vanish, Edward, you must swear it will be to freedom, not to a deeper prison. Betrayal would kill me quicker than a blade." Pinkerton set the letters down with care, his jaw tight. She feared betrayal even as she planned her escape. She trusted Edward, yet doubt gnawed at her. Either she stepped willingly into his arms, or she walked herself into a trap. Warren leaned forward. "And if he is tied to smuggling, perhaps both. She may be more valuable to him as leverage than as a bride." Pinkerton tapped the edge of the desk. "We must know his true purpose. A suitor writes in passion. These letters bear answers, but not all. They reference freedom, escape, liberty, words common in reform circles. Blackwell may have used her longing as bait." He turned to Webster, who had just arrived with rain still dripping from his coat. "Trace the paper. Find who sold it. Expensive stationery carries fewer buyers. If we know where Edward acquired his sheets, we can narrow his circle." Webster nodded and left at once. Later that night, Pinkerton himself returned to the Winslow mansion. The Steel Baron greeted him reluctantly, still seething at the exposure of the coded ledger. But Pinkerton's manner brooked no delay. "Your daughter corresponded with Edward Blackwell," he said bluntly. "These are her letters." He placed copies, not originals, on the desk. "She feared you. She feared your arranged marriage. Yet she also feared betrayal by this Edward. Tell me, Winslow, who among your rivals bears that name?" The Baron's face flushed. "None. At least, none of consequence." He hesitated. "Though years ago, there was an Edward Blackwell in Pittsburgh. A clerk in the mills. He stirred unrest among the men, preached of unions and liberty. I dismissed him, and he vanished. I thought him gone for good." Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "Then he has returned, stronger. And Clara may be his instrument of revenge." Winslow slammed his fist on the desk. "Then destroy him. Whatever it takes." Pinkerton gathered the letters calmly. "Destruction is easy. Truth is harder. I seek truth first. By dawn, Webster returned with fresh intelligence. He laid a sheet of fine cream stationery on the desk. Edward's letters to Clara were penned on this. I found the source, an exclusive stationer near Dearborn. They recall a tall gentleman buying in bulk 2 months past. Paid cash, asked no questions, but left a name on the order ledger, E. Blackwell. Pinkerton exhaled through his nose, grim satisfaction in his eyes. He grows careless. Vanity tempts him to sign the mask he wears. We have our thread. Kate Warren studied the letters once more. There's something else, she said softly. Notice how Clara speaks of liberty, choice, escape. These are not words a sheltered heiress invents. She borrowed them, from him. He groomed her mind with promises of a cause larger than herself. She believed she fled her father. Perhaps she truly fled into a revolution. The room fell silent. The notion rang true. Blackwell was no common thief, nor even a fortune hunter. He was a zealot, a man who dressed betrayal in the garments of justice. Clara Winslow had not only been stolen, she had been converted. That afternoon, Pinkerton and Warren visited a reform hall on the edge of the city, a gathering place for orators and radicals. Posters clung to the walls, proclaiming, 8 hours for work, 8 for rest, 8 for what we will. Inside, fiery voices rang against the rafters. Men spoke of strikes, women of suffrage. Liberty was in the air, acrid as coal dust. A young speaker mentioned Edward Blackwell by name, praising him as a strategist, a man who guided their cause from the shadows. He speaks of breaking the chains of industry, the speaker cried, of freeing even the daughters of tyrants. The crowd roared. Pinkerton and Warren exchanged a glance. The letters had been no mere love notes, they were recruitment, written in the language of revolt. Clara Winslow was not just missing, she was being remade into a banner against her own blood. Back at headquarters, Pinkerton spread the letters, the ledger, the notes from the hall across his desk. A pattern was forming, Clara's yearning for freedom, Blackwell's manipulation, Winslow's empire standing as the enemy of labor. She had become the perfect symbol, wealthy yet sympathetic, bound yet seeking release. To radicals, her presence gave legitimacy. To her father, her loss spelled ruin. Pinkerton's pipe glowed red as he spoke at last. We are no longer chasing a runaway heiress. We are unraveling a war of ideals. Blackwell seeks to wound Winslow by turning his daughter into a cause. And if Clara herself believes in it, she will not cry for rescue. Warren asked quietly, then what is our task? To return her against her will? Pinkerton's eyes were flint in the lamplight. Our task is truth. Whether she stays or returns, whether she is victim or willing ally, we must know. Until then, every shadow in Chicago may hide Edward Blackwell, and every letter Clara wrote is another stone in his fortress. Chapter 6, A Trail Through the Marshes. The telegram came before sunrise. Pinkerton, already awake with pipe smoke curling about his desk, broke the seal and read quickly. A railway switchman stationed along the Illinois River had reported something unusual. A covered wagon had been seen leaving the city late at night, its driver hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. It had turned off the main road and disappeared into the marshlands west of Joliet. The description of the driver, tall, angular, stovepipe silhouette against the lantern glow, was enough. Pinkerton wasted no time. He summoned Timothy Webster, whose patience and quiet strength he valued on such ventures. They armed themselves lightly, carrying revolvers more for necessity than bravado, and set out on horseback. The road soon gave way to rough track, and then to sodden earth where hoofbeats sank deep. Mist hung low over the ground, muffling every sound, and the marsh stretched wide like a desolate sea of reeds. By midday they came upon the shack the switchman had described. It squatted on stilts above black water, its boards warped, roof sagging. A place unfit for habitation, yet smoke still rose from the crooked chimney. Webster tethered the horses among the reeds, while Pinkerton advanced with pistol drawn. The door creaked beneath his hand. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and kerosene. Crates were stacked along the walls, their stenciled markings crudely scraped away. One had burst, revealing rifles wrapped in oilcloth. Another held tin canisters of powder. Smuggling, as Pinkerton suspected. But it was what lay on the rough table that froze him for a moment, a monogrammed handkerchief, embroidered with a C. The delicate cloth carried the faint trace of lavender perfume. Clara Winslow had been here. Webster's voice was low. She's close. Or was. Pinkerton pocketed the handkerchief and examined the room further. Papers lay scattered, ledgers marked with routes, prices, initials. One page bore the name Blackwell in bold script, alongside lists of deliveries and payments. But before Pinkerton could study more, the quiet outside cracked with violence. Gunfire exploded through the reeds. Bullets ripped through the shack's thin walls, splinters flying. Pinkerton dove to the floor, Webster rolling behind a crate. Through a gap in the boards, Pinkerton glimpsed men moving swiftly among the cattails, masked, coordinated, firing not wildly but with trained precision. These were not bandits, they were soldiers in everything but name. Ambush, Webster hissed, returning fire through the wall. One assailant cried out, collapsing into the water. The others pressed closer, forcing them to retreat. Pinkerton kicked open a rear door and gestured. Together they splashed into the marsh, the icy water dragging at their legs. Shots cracked overhead, reeds whipping in the spray. They pushed through muck and water, weaving among hummocks, until at last they stumbled onto higher ground where the marsh thinned into woodland. Their pursuers hesitated at the edge, unwilling to expose themselves on open ground. For now, the chase broke off. Breath steaming in the cold, Pinkerton leaned against a tree, revolver still in hand. Not random thieves. They moved with discipline. Blackwell commands more than rhetoric, he commands men trained to kill. Webster reloaded calmly. Ex-soldiers, perhaps. Many still drift since the war. A man with money and purpose could gather them. Pinkerton nodded grimly. The thought gnawed at him, Clara Winslow was not merely stolen. She was shielded by an organization that smuggled arms, guarded by killers loyal to a zealot. Rescue would no longer be a matter of persuasion but of strategy. That night they took shelter in a hunting cabin offered by a farmer sympathetic to Pinkerton's name. Around a small fire, they spread the recovered papers across a rough-hewn table. Routes marked the river, highlighting key crossings. One was circled twice, labeled transfer. Next to it, a date, 2 nights hence. Pinkerton tapped the circle with his pipe stem. Here. Blackwell intends to move something important. Weapons, most likely. Or Clara herself. Webster's brow furrowed. If she is with them willingly, she may not call for help. She may even resist you. I know, Pinkerton said quietly. But the truth must be seen with one's own eyes. Until then, speculation is ash. He leaned back, the firelight hard on his face. We prepare for the crossing. If Clara is there, we take her alive. If Blackwell is there, we drag him into the light. Either way, this ends. The following day they scouted the marsh crossing. The place was bleak, waterlogged banks, a rotting pier, a shack half-collapsed under its own weight. Barges could pull in unnoticed, sheltered by reeds. The ground bore fresh tracks of wagons and horses. The smell of kerosene lingered heavy in the air. Pinkerton crouched, examining a set of prints distinct from the rest. Smaller, lighter, yet deliberate. A woman's step, pressed into the mud no more than 2 days old. His hand closed around the embroidered handkerchief in his pocket. Clara had walked here too. The marsh whispered with frogs and distant gulls, but the silence felt heavy, unnatural. Pinkerton rose, his instincts prickling. "We've seen enough. Tonight we return with more men." Webster nodded, and they slipped back toward the city to muster support. That evening at headquarters, Pinkerton briefed his operatives with steel in his voice. "Blackwell's men are not rabble. They are trained, armed, disciplined. He hides in the marshlands, moving contraband through river crossings. In 2 nights he plans a transfer. Clara may be part of it. We strike then." Kate Warren asked, "And if she refuses to come?" Pinkerton's expression was grim. "Then at least we will know where she stands. Truth is the only coin we spend." The operatives nodded. They trusted their chief, but the weight of the task hung heavy. To cross into Blackwell's stronghold was to invite battle. Yet to hesitate was to lose Clara forever. At dawn, Pinkerton sat alone at his desk, the embroidered handkerchief before him. He thought of Clara, an heiress torn between gilded captivity and the dangerous promises of freedom. Perhaps she saw in Edward Blackwell the key to her cage. But Pinkerton knew cages wore many shapes. Some gleamed with gold, others were built from ideals that devoured their believers whole. He tamped fresh tobacco into his pipe and struck a match. The flame flared, then steadied. In 2 nights' time, he would walk into the marsh with his men, ready to face whatever lay beyond the reeds. Whether Clara Winslow awaited as victim or willing ally, one truth was certain: the trail through the marshes led not just to her fate, but to the heart of Edward Blackwell's design. And Allan Pinkerton, weary yet unyielding, was prepared to follow it to the end. Chapter 7: The Betrayal at Midnight. The night chosen for the strike was black as ink, the marsh swallowing moonlight into its stagnant pools. Clouds smothered the sky, and the reeds whispered with a sound that might have been voices if one listened too long. Allan Pinkerton led 6 operatives through the mire, boots sinking into mud, lanterns shuddered. Each man carried a revolver, some a rifle, but it was discipline, not firepower, that Pinkerton relied upon. He knew Blackwell commanded order, not chaos, and order must be met in kind. By the time they reached the ruined pier, the hour was close to midnight. From the shadows, Pinkerton raised his hand, halting the group. Across the water, a lantern bobbed, signal of an approaching barge. Faint voices carried over the stillness, men speaking low, methodical. Soon the creak of timbers and splash of poles against water echoed, and the barge slid into view, its deck laden with crates. Figures moved upon it, shadows thick with weapons. Then, amid those shadows, a pale shape stood apart. A woman in cloak and hood, her bearing unmistakably refined even in dim light. Clara Winslow. Pinkerton's chest tightened, though he allowed no sign to show. She was alive, but whether she was prisoner or partner remained unclear. "Hold," Pinkerton whispered to his men. "We watch first." The barge nudged against the pier, ropes cast silently. Blackwell himself appeared then, tall and lean, stovepipe hat cutting a sharp line against the stars. His voice carried with confidence, not secrecy. "Unload quickly. The wagons must be moving before dawn." 2 wagons waited on shore, their drivers tense, rifles across their laps. Crates were hauled down, rifles, powder, cartridges. Smuggling confirmed. Yet it was Clara who drew Pinkerton's eye. She spoke quietly to Blackwell, her hand gesturing toward the marsh as though wary. Blackwell placed a steadying hand on her arm, his posture protective, even tender. To the watching detective, it was a gesture too practiced, too rehearsed. Pinkerton motioned to Kate Warren, crouched at his side. Her eyes were hard. "She doesn't look captive," she whispered. "No," Pinkerton admitted. "But watch closely. Chains need not be iron." When the last crate was loaded onto the wagons, Blackwell addressed his men. "The path is clear. By morning these supplies will strengthen our cause, and with Miss Winslow's aid, our voice will be louder still." The men cheered softly, though with discipline. Clara lifted her hood, revealing her face in the lantern glow. She looked pale but resolute, her eyes shining with conviction rather than fear. "If my father's empire cannot hear the cries of his workers, then let him hear them through me," she declared. The words cut through Pinkerton like a knife. Clara had not been stolen, she had crossed a line willingly. He raised his hand to signal his operatives forward. But before the order could be given, a branch snapped behind them. One of the younger agents had shifted his weight wrong, breaking silence. Shouts erupted at once. Ambush! Blackwell's men drew weapons, firing into the dark. Muzzles flared, the pier lit in chaos. Pinkerton cursed, pulling his revolver. His operatives returned fire, bullets sparking against crates. In the melee, Clara cried out, though not in terror, in warning. "Edward! There, in the reeds!" She pointed directly toward Pinkerton's position. For one stunned moment, Pinkerton faltered. She had betrayed them. Whether knowingly or by panic, she had marked them out. Blackwell turned, pistol flashing. Pinkerton barely dropped in time, bark splintering inches from his head. "Withdraw," he ordered, his voice cutting through the roar. His men fell back in disciplined retreat, covering one another as they melted into the marsh. The smuggler wagons rumbled away, escorted by gunfire, vanishing into the dark. Only when the echoes faded did Pinkerton halt his operatives in a thicket. Breathless, mud-streaked, they gathered around him. Webster spat into the water. "She saw you, and she warned them. She's chosen their side." Pinkerton wiped grime from his brow, expression grim. "Not chosen. Persuaded. Groomed to believe this cause is her salvation. Still, the result is the same." He looked back toward the pier, now empty but for broken planks. "She has declared her loyalty, and it is not to her father." Hours later, Pinkerton returned alone to the Winslow mansion. Midnight had long passed, but the Baron remained awake, pacing his study like a restless bull. When Pinkerton entered, his boots leaving mud across the ornate rug, Winslow turned with eyes wild. "Well? Have you found her?" Pinkerton dropped heavily into a chair, pipe unlit, voice hard. "I saw her. She lives. But she will not return." Winslow's face blanched. "What do you mean she will not return?" "She stands beside Blackwell," Pinkerton said flatly. "She believes in his cause. She warned him of our presence, betraying us at the pier. Whether from fear or conviction, she is lost to you." The Baron's hands trembled on his cane. "Lies. She is my daughter. She would never." "She has," Pinkerton interrupted. "And you bear the blame. You caged her in wealth, shackled her to marriage, ignored her heart. Blackwell offered her escape, even if only into illusion. She clutched it. And now she stands against you." Winslow's fury boiled. He struck the cane against the floor. "Then kill him. Drag him from his hole and put him in the dirt." Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "I find truth, not vengeance. If Clara chose this path willingly, I cannot drag her back like cargo. What I can do is expose Blackwell's network, strip his power until he has nothing to offer her but dust." Winslow's face twisted between rage and despair. "Then do it. But know this, Pinkerton, if she does not return, my fortune dies with her. And so, perhaps, does my name." Pinkerton rose, weary but unbowed. Perhaps names deserve to die when built on iron and fear. He left Winslow seething in the study, the portrait of Clara watching silently from the wall. Back at his office, Pinkerton gathered his operatives. Lanterns burned low, fatigue etched into every face. He spoke with the weight of finality. "Blackwell has turned Clara into his banner. She is no longer merely a missing heiress, she is his proof that the mighty can be humbled. If we strike again, we strike not to rescue but to reveal. His network must be exposed, his smuggling dismantled. Only then will the veil fall from her eyes. Kate Warne asked quietly, and if it never falls? Pinkerton tamped tobacco into his pipe, though he did not light it. Then the world will judge her choice, not us. Our task is justice. Only truth can endure midnight betrayals. The room fell silent, every operative understanding the burden. Somewhere in the marshes, Clara Winslow now walked beside Edward Blackwell, believing she had escaped captivity when in truth she had walked into a greater prison. Pinkerton's resolve hardened. Midnight had revealed betrayal, but dawn would bring reckoning. Chapter 8, The Vanishing Heiress. The storm broke over Chicago the night Allan Pinkerton prepared his final move. Rain swept in sheets against the windows of his Washington Street office, thunder rolling across the lake. Inside, the detective sat with his pipe cold, his men gathered close. Maps of the river crossings and ledgers of contraband lay spread across the table, weighted by ink bottles and revolvers. Every scrap of evidence pointed to a single truth: Edward Blackwell would attempt one last departure, ferrying arms and allies downriver to waiting sympathizers in St. Louis. Clara Winslow, the unwilling jewel in his crown, would be aboard. Pinkerton's voice was steady, but the strain around his eyes betrayed the gravity of the moment. We meet him at the harbor. He will think himself untouchable in the storm, but storms blind smugglers as well as detectives. Tonight, we cut his network at the root. Kate Warne adjusted the pistol beneath her cloak. And Clara? She asked. Pinkerton paused. If she steps aboard of her own will, we cannot drag her back. Our duty is to end Blackwell's deceit, not chain a young woman to her father's house. But truth must be shown to her, if only once, without the veil of his words. The operatives nodded, though unease lingered. It was one thing to fight smugglers. It was another to face an heiress who might not want saving. The harbor lay dark under the storm, ships rocking against creaking piers. Lanterns swayed in the gale, their light fractured across rain-slick planks. Pinkerton and his operatives moved like shadows among stacked crates, their weapons hidden beneath oilskins. The sound of hoofbeats carried faintly through the downpour, then the rumble of wagons. Blackwell had come. The wagons halted at the pier, horses stamping nervously in the thunder. Men leapt down, shoulders hunched against rain, and began unloading crates. Rifles again, bundles of powder, all bound for rebellion. At their head strode Blackwell, stovepipe hat glistening, coat whipping in the gale. And beside him, hood pulled close, walked Clara Winslow. Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. She did not look frightened. She looked determined, lips set, her hand steady on the barge's railing. Blackwell raised his voice over the wind. Tonight, we sail beyond Winslow's grasp. With these arms, with this alliance, we strike blows no baron can ignore. And with Miss Winslow as our testament, the nation will see even the wealthy choose liberty over chains. The men cheered, voices lost in thunder. Pinkerton stepped forward then, his revolver glinting as lightning lit the sky. Edward Blackwell. His voice cut like iron. Your cause is nothing but theft and deceit. The law ends here. The dock froze. Clara's hood slipped back, her eyes wide as she saw him. For a heartbeat, recognition flickered, relief, perhaps, or guilt. Then she turned sharply to Blackwell. He's here. Do not let him stop us. Blackwell smiled, calm even as his men bristled. Ah, Mr. Pinkerton. The hound of empire himself. You protect tyrants while calling it law. Do you not see? She came to me willingly. She stands with freedom. Pinkerton's gaze never left Clara's face. Did you come willingly, Miss Winslow? Or were you promised freedom only to be chained to another master? Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Blackwell drew his pistol. Enough. This ends with you in the river. The standoff cracked with thunder and gunfire. Pinkerton's men surged from cover, rifles barking, bullets sparking off crates. Blackwell's guards returned fire, the dock erupting in chaos. Lightning split the night, illuminating men grappling, weapons flashing. Clara cried out as a stray shot shattered a lantern, flames licking across spilled kerosene. Pinkerton fought his way forward, eyes fixed on Blackwell. The zealot moved with a duelist's precision, firing methodically, retreating toward the barge. Clara clung to his arm, torn between terror and conviction. "Clara!" Pinkerton shouted through the storm. "Look at the fire around you. This is not freedom. This is ruin." For the first time, doubt cracked her face. The flames roared higher, smoke choking the air. Blackwell jerked her roughly toward the gangplank. "Do not listen. He serves your father, not you. He would see you caged again." But his roughness betrayed him. Clara's eyes widened with horror. The gentle suitor vanished, replaced by the tyrant beneath. In that instant, Pinkerton raised his pistol. The shot rang true, striking Blackwell's arm. He staggered, dropping his weapon. Clara tore free, stumbling back as the gangplank collapsed in the fire. The remaining smugglers, seeing their leader wounded and the pier ablaze, broke into panic. Some leapt into the water, others fled into the storm. Pinkerton's men pressed the advantage, driving the survivors into retreat. At last, only Blackwell remained, clutching his bleeding arm, hat lost to the wind. His eyes burned with hatred as Pinkerton advanced. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But ideas cannot be killed with bullets. She will remember me." Pinkerton's voice was iron. "She will remember your lies." He struck Blackwell across the jaw with the butt of his revolver, dropping him unconscious to the pier. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving the harbor in ruins. Blackwell lay bound, his men scattered or captured. Crates of weapons smoldered among the ashes. Clara Winslow stood apart, cloak damp, face pale. Pinkerton approached quietly. "You are safe now." She turned on him with sudden fury. "Safe? You have shattered everything. Blackwell may be a zealot, but he gave me hope. My father gives me nothing but chains." Pinkerton's expression softened, though his tone remained steady. "Hope built on deceit burns quicker than powder. You saw it yourself in his hand upon you, in the fire at your feet. He did not free you, Clara. He only traded your cage for his banner." Tears welled in her eyes, though she turned away. "And what would you have me do? Return to my father's house, to silence and obedience?" "That choice," Pinkerton said gently, "is yours. But it must be yours alone, not whispered into your ear by men who see you as means to their ends. You have seen both faces now, the iron cage and the false freedom. Perhaps, with truth in hand, you can find a path neither offers." She said nothing more, only stared at the gray horizon as the morning sun broke weakly through clouds. By week's end, Edward Blackwell was taken into custody, his network unraveled through the ledgers and testimonies. Charles Winslow reclaimed his daughter, though whether she felt reclaimed or imprisoned once more remained uncertain. Pinkerton, weary, returned to his office. He placed Clara's embroidered handkerchief in a drawer, beside relics of other cases. To him, it was no trophy but a reminder, not every mystery ended with joy. Sometimes the living returned broken, their hearts torn between worlds. He tamped his pipe, staring at the motto above his desk, "We never sleep." True enough. For a detective, sleep was rare. And for Allan Pinkerton, truth was seldom kind. As the city roared outside with smoke and industry, he closed his eyes for a moment, knowing the world moved on. Clara Winslow had vanished from innocence into something harder, stranger. Whether she found freedom or captivity now depended not on Edward Blackwell, nor on Charles Winslow, but on herself. And that, Pinkerton thought grimly, was the only victory worth chasing.